Hello, this is Brian.
And this is Stephanie.
Welcome to the making and the remaking of a codependent mind.
In this episode, we're going to transition to another season, Season 8.
That's right, and that's because our new book is out today. The book is called Me, You, and Us, and it's available today in both paperback and Kindle format. We are so excited to have it finished and have it out in the world.
And just a slightly funny side note on the title. Some of you might remember that we had an episode, I think it was back in Season 4, called You, Me, and Us. And that's the original title we were going to give the book. And then we thought, maybe it's not a great idea to put the you first in the title, since that's a struggle that Brian has had for most of his life, putting other people first in a relationship. So that became Me, You, and Us.
And a little bit about the origin of this book. I had read a lot of relationship books, actually, over the years, including during those relationships that we talked about, R and J. And when I did, I was assuming that first, those relationships were worth working on, that they were worth fixing, but they weren't. And then I also was assuming that because they didn't get fixed from reading these books and trying to do what they were telling me to do, was because that I was just applying it wrong, and that there was something wrong with me. Just I was doing it wrong. But really, when it came down to it, I was not the audience for those books. That was the problem. So this book in particular is for the rest of us. This is for us who need a whole new way of looking at relationships.
And again, it's available now on Amazon, the paperback and the ebook versions. Or you can listen for free, chapter by chapter, over the next 14 episodes.
And before we transition to the book, I just want to say again how meaningful and incredible this experience of doing this podcast has been. Really thinking and talking through all these topics week after week for the last 3 years, it's had a huge impact on us. But then also to add to that, having all of you following along and providing your feedback and your stories, I really came to feel that community. I mean, possibly for the first time in my life.
In recognition how meaningful this has been for both of us, I'd like to read a modified version of the last paragraph of the last chapter of the new book. So it's a little preview. It was actually written to be directed at the readers of the book, but we most definitely feel the same about all of you. It reads, "We're grateful for you, the listener, for giving us your attention, for caring enough about your relationships to want to reflect, learn, and do the work. The idea of you fills us with hope. We want for you a relationship where you can be fully yourself, where your needs are met with care, where your joy is celebrated and your pain held with gentleness, one in which you feel seen. And more than anything, we want you to remember that doing this work, this slow, courageous work of building better relationships, matters. It matters deeply, and you are not alone in it."
And with that, let's begin. Chapter 1, A New Kind of Relationship. Why are relationships so hard? For something that holds so much promise, love, connection, support, passion, romantic relationships often leave us confused, disappointed, and hurt. We long to be seen, to be chosen, to feel cherished. We chase the feeling of being fully known and deeply loved. And yet many of us end up repeating painful patterns, finding ourselves stuck in the same old dynamics, asking the same heartbreaking questions. Why do our relationships so often fall short? What gets in the way of building the kind of love that lasts? I have been lonely for most of my life. My childhood wasn't particularly difficult or deprived. In fact, I was privileged in many ways. I grew up with 2 parents in a middle-class house, free from physical violence. I wasn't a victim of racism, sexism, or bigotry, but nevertheless I suffered, both inside and outside my home. I struggled to connect with people, usually just taking what I could get when it came to friends or romantic partners. I was a wounded person who, more often than not, wound up attached to other wounded people. Throughout all this, the loneliness persisted. I reached my mid-40s with 2 failed marriages behind me, never knowing what it felt like to be truly close to another human being, to cherish and to be cherished. All I seemed to have to show for my experiences was chronic depression and anxiety. Was there something wrong with me? Was I defective? Why did it seem like everyone else knew what they were doing? I've used the word disordered to describe myself, but that is more accurately a description of my behavior within relationships, not me as a person. Not only were productive relationship habits not modeled to me by my parents, I didn't manage to pick them up anywhere along the way. Instead, I mostly relied on a grab bag of dysfunctional behavior patterns, falling into categories like codependency, BPD, anxious and avoidant attachment, dependency, and even narcissism. For me, these behaviors at various times in various relationships looked like the following. I would pacify, comply, validate, compliment, entertain, and accommodate others regardless of what I actually felt about them or what I actually wanted. I focused on what other people wanted, needed, or expected from me and felt intense anxiety if I thought I might fall short of those expectations. I was constantly seeking approval. I felt a sense that the other person in the relationship had all the power, leaving me feeling unheard, unseen, powerless, and full of resentment. I would defend and excuse other people's mistreatment, whether toward myself or others, by minimizing the harm or prioritizing their perspectives over my own reality. I had a fear of discord or conflict, to such a degree that I would suppress my own emotions, opinions, and needs to maintain peace, even at great personal cost. I was hyper-focused on my partner, about where they were or what they were thinking. I constantly scanned for signs of approval or withdrawal. My sense of security depended on their moods and actions. I had difficulty accepting compliments or asking for what I wanted. I felt undeserving or fearful of rejection when expressing my needs or desires. I often withdrew or shut down when people got too close. I had a fear of vulnerability, of the shame I often felt when opening up to people. I struggled to cope with painful emotions, anger, sadness, fear, confusion, disappointment, whether they were my own feelings or someone else's. Rather than processing them, I resorted to denial, dismissal, and avoidance. Over the years, I read a number of relationship books. I diligently took notes and attempted to apply their lessons. Nothing ever worked. Nothing really changed. In fact, sometimes my situations got worse. I needed more than simply learning about strategies for navigating or repairing a largely healthy relationship. I needed to reinvent the way I approached relationships entirely. I needed a different kind of relationship book, one that spoke to me and people like me. This is that book. This is a book for those of us who have rarely, if ever, had functional relationships, who don't even know what they look like or feel like to begin with. It's for those of us who are and have been interpersonally wounded, and who have had mostly, if not only, relationships with other wounded people. It's for people for whom interpersonal relationships have been a source of trauma, who are hypervigilant and easily triggered in relationships. It's for those of us who have struggled to know ourselves and keep ourselves safe in relationships. For many of us, relationships end badly, leaving us with unhealed scars and confusion about what went wrong, only to repeat the same patterns over and over again. I wrote this book because I'm now in the type of relationship I've always yearned for, one filled with understanding, safety, and genuine love. A relationship that I'm proud of, where I feel fully myself, where I feel powerful and engaged. One in which I'm driven by a desire for connection, for understanding, for growth, rather than feeling pushed and prodded by a fear of failing to perform for other people's expectations. In this relationship, I let my emotions guide me, not by reacting to them blindly or pushing them away, but by listening to them, reflecting on them, and sharing them with the person I love. The transition from my old way of relating to this new type of relationship hasn't been an easy one. It has been ongoing work, but it's work that I genuinely want to do, that I feel excited to do. There's nothing new about the tools themselves that I cover in this book. The tools that have brought me to where I am now are the same tools I've used to some extent for most of my life. They're tools we all use. What matters isn't the tools themselves, but how they're used and whether they actually produce the desired outcome. For much of my life, I was either using these tools incorrectly, applying them for the wrong reasons, or using them with the wrong people. Instead of fostering healthy connections, they often had the opposite effect. Sometimes there was real harm caused, not just to me, but to those around me. Throughout this book, I draw on my personal experiences, using my relationship with my wife Stephanie as a real-life example. I explore how I've come to understand the true need for each of the relational tools and how to use them most effectively. I contrast my experience with Stephanie against my 2 previous marriages, both of which involved partners who exhibited relationally disordered behavior, including severe narcissistic patterns. My goal is to clearly show how different a relationship can look and feel when these tools are used authentically and productively, and how to recognize when that is or isn't happening. This book makes a couple of assumptions about you, the reader. It assumes that you have made some effort to understand the various behaviors that have contributed to your interpersonal challenges. You may be stuck trying to figure out how exactly to go about behaving differently, how that might look or feel, and this book will help you with that. But you know what you have been doing has not been working, and something needs to change. This book also assumes that you not only feel entitled to healthy, loving relationships, but are prepared to honor yourself by leaving a relationship that isn't meeting your needs or expectations. For most of my life, I didn't behave as though I was entitled to consideration and respect, and I paid the price for that mindset. Nobody is under any obligation to settle for a life they don't want just because they found themselves in a relationship with someone. It's okay to want more, and you don't need anyone's permission to leave a relationship that isn't working for you. Ending a relationship is never comfortable or easy, but if you enter a relationship without feeling as though you have the ability to leave it, your safety is compromised right from the start. A critical part of having the ability to end a relationship is recognizing and acknowledging the presence of abuse within an existing relationship. It can be extremely destabilizing to experience mistreatment at the hands of the very person we should feel the most safe with. Emotions like shame can make it difficult to be honest about the reality of the situation. I know this from personal experience, having been in multiple abusive relationships. Abuse can take on many forms, and emotional and psychological abuse can be just as harmful as physical abuse and needs to be taken just as seriously. Examples of abusive behavior include verbal violence like condescension, belittlement, insults, and name-calling, guilt, threats, and coercion, explosive anger involving shouting, swearing, slamming doors, or throwing things, contempt or constant criticism, physical violence, and manipulative behaviors like gaslighting or stonewalling. If any of these behaviors are consistently present in a relationship, and they haven't been acknowledged, taken responsibility for, addressed with genuine remorse, and followed by honest efforts to change, then that is an unsafe relationship. If you are concerned that you may be in an unsafe relationship, put this book down and call someone. Do not use any of the tools in this book to try to fix, maintain, or sustain an abusive relationship. From personal experience, I can say that trying to use relationship tools to fix an abusive situation can have catastrophic effects. So how do we get from there to here? From dysfunctional relationships to strong, loving partnerships. Before taking a closer look at the tools, there is the matter of how to approach the whole idea of relationships to begin with. Let's take a step back and reconceptualize what it means to be in a relationship. What are they for? What are they supposed to do for us? How do we know if we're in a functional or a dysfunctional one? Before we start using tools, we need to make sure we're building something we even want in the first place. Me, you, and us. There's a common perception, some might even hold it up as an ideal, that when 2 people come together to form a relationship, they merge into one. It's a kind of relationship math where 1 + 1 = 1, an inseparable unit in the eyes of God, tradition, or community. If you look closely at this equation, however, the math doesn't really add up to a healthy, functional relationship. I lived by the 1 + 1 = 1 formula for most of my life. In order to make or maintain connections with people, my parents, my friends, my romantic partners, I cut out parts of myself, suppressed or denied my needs and desires in order to fully accommodate theirs. I hid from myself and from everyone else in order to reduce my half of the equation to as close to zero as possible, putting all of the emphasis on what the other person wanted or needed. That was my path to oneness with the other person. Really, when it comes down to it, the formula that I was operating under was a 0 + 1 = 1. The less of an individual I could be, the better. The smoother things would go, the safer I would be. The math I was performing was the math of enmeshment. With enmeshment, there's little to no distinction between individuals in a relationship or family system. Boundaries and autonomy don't exist. For me, being in a relationship meant being completely immersed in the other person's feelings, needs, and desires at all times. Enmeshment math did not work out for me. It resulted in a world of servitude with external rewards or punishment motivating my every behavior. It was an existence devoid of authentic connections, the freedom to feel my own desires and be guided by my own passions. Relationships in which I felt truly seen, safe, and connected were always just out of reach. When I first started learning to recognize my autonomy in relationships, there was a temptation to swing too far in the other direction, or to at least assume that's what I needed to do. I'll just focus on myself and let you worry about yourself. I just need to mind my own business, right? But that math didn't add up either. I didn't want to retreat into extreme independence or isolation. But how could I be both connected and autonomous at the same time? I needed a new relationship equation, 1 + 1 = 3. As important as it is to recognize our personal autonomy and maintain a clear sense of self, in order for a relationship to be strong, secure, and sustaining, it's equally important to think of the relationship itself as a distinct entity, one with its own set of needs. I've found it extremely helpful to keep in mind those three separate entities at play when navigating interpersonal situations. There's me, there's you, and there's us. Think of a relationship as a three-legged stool. It's not going to be stable unless there's a well-articulated, well-respected me, a well-articulated, well-respected you, and a well-articulated, well-respected us. What that means is that each person in the relationship has a responsibility to themselves, to the other person, and to the relationship they are building together. All three entities need to be kept in mind when making decisions about how to act on our individual needs and desires, or when processing and responding to our emotions. Most of the relationships throughout my life were inauthentic, conditional relationships, built upon the needs of others, or at least what I perceived them to be. The behaviors I learned in my childhood, my interpersonal habits, weren't about honoring myself. They were about desperately trying to achieve some kind of stability in the face of disconnection and loneliness. Moving away from enmeshment and towards a conscious partnership, one driven by choice, with autonomy, mutuality, and authenticity, requires not only understanding the value of each leg of that relational stool, but also reimagining how they fit together in a way that keeps the foundation strong, balanced, and supportive.
And that concludes Chapter 1. Join us in a couple weeks for Chapter 2, entitled Me and You, or you can pick up the book on Amazon today.